In this video, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing integers. Okay, you have already learned or shown how to multiply and divide integers using models with the integer chips, also called counters, or the number lines. And part of your homework on Tuesday was to complete this multiplication table. This multiplication table is a little bit different than the ones we're used to because this one has positive and negative factors. So if you take a look at the first one, it's saying for you to multiply -4 times -4. So -4 times -4. Remember, if you write a number outside of parentheses like this, the operation is multiplication, or you could put a dot in between to represent multiplication. So we're saying that we want -4 groups of -4. And we've talked about how you cannot do that. You cannot have negative groups. So we learned to rewrite this as the opposite of 4 groups of -4. And then to model it with our chips, we'll put the opposite on the outside of parentheses. Inside our parentheses, we want 4 groups. And inside each group, we want 4 negatives. And once we go count them all up, we see that there are 16 negatives. However, we want the opposite of this, and the opposite of a negative would be a positive 16. So -4 times -4 is positive 16. Then we continue to do the same thing, -4 groups of -3. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the models, but you would get positive 12. This should have been a -2 here. That was a typo on the worksheet. Here you would get an 8. This one would be 4. Of course, 4 times anything times 0 is 0. Anything times 1 is itself. So let's come up to -4 groups of positive 2. Okay, this time we still don't want the negative groups, so I'm going to use the commutative property. And I'm going to rewrite this as 2 groups of -4. So when I model it, I just need 2 groups. Inside each group, 4 negatives. Now, count them, there's -8. My next one is -4 groups times 3. -4 groups of 3, which commutative property, I'll rewrite this as 3 groups of -4. So I can use the same model here, just add one more group of -4, and I'm going to get a -12. -4 times 4, I would just rewrite this using the commutative property and want 4 groups of -4. So I'll just add one more group of 4 negatives, and you get -16. If I come down here, let me erase my bottom, the bottom section here, the work I've done. And you'll see that the models that I have been using are the integer chips because they are easier to draw than the number lines, a little bit faster. If I come down here to the 2's and I take 2 times -4, I'm saying that I want 2 groups, and inside each group 4 negatives. So when I count them all up, I get -8. So 2 times -4 is -8. If I do 2 times -3, that's saying I want 2 groups, and inside each group I want 3 negatives, which is going to give us a -6. 2 groups of -2 will give us -4. 2 groups of -1 will give us -2. And of course, 2 groups of 0 is 0. 2 groups of 1 is 2. 2 groups of 2 would be 4. 2 groups of 3 would be 6. And 2 groups of 4 would be 8. Okay, so you should have completed this whole table. But let's look at the numbers that we have. I've only completed a couple of rows. This is enough for us to go through and answer the questions that were at the bottom. Multiplying a positive by a positive, does that result in a positive or a negative product? Well, you can take a look at a couple examples. Here's a +1 And when I multiply it by a positive 2, I get a positive 2. Okay, let's try the 2. When I take a positive 2 and I multiply it by a positive 4, it gives me a positive 8. So you can see that any of these positive numbers on the left, when you multiply them by the positive factors up here at the top, they give us all positive answers. So multiplying a positive by a positive results in a positive product. What about a positive times a negative? Well, let's take a look. Here are the positives right down here. So let's start with positive 1. If I multiply it by negative 4, it gives me a negative answer, doesn't it? If I take my positive 1 and I multiply it by negative 3, it gives me, oh, that should have been negative 2. It gives me a negative 2. I think my numbers are off a little bit. This should be negative 1. This should be negative 2. Okay, then let's move on to the 2. If I take a positive 2 and multiply it by negative 3, it gives me a negative 6. So each time I multiplied a positive times a negative, it gave me a negative product. What about when you switch it around, commutative property, and you do a negative times a positive? You're still going to get the same thing, aren't you? It's going to be negative. And you can check up here, a negative, start with the negatives, negative 4, times a positive, let's do times 2, it gives us a negative 8. Negative 3 times a positive 4 gives us a negative 12. Okay, so each time we got a negative product. And the last one, multiplying a negative times a negative. Okay, let's look. Let's go with negative 4 and multiply that by negative 4. It gives us a positive 16. What about negative 4 times negative 3? It gives us a positive 12. What about negative 3 times negative 3? It gives us a positive 9. So each time when we multiply a negative by a negative, we get a positive product. So using our models, we were able to actually come up with the rules on the sign of our answers, or on the sign of the products, when multiplying two factors together. So you need your notes booklet, your integer operations foldable booklet, and we're going to fill this in. So here are the rules. The product of two integers with the same sign is positive. So if it says, where it says same sign, you're going to write positive. Here, 3 times 4, they're both positive. Same signs, positive answer. Here, negative 9 times negative 2, they're both negatives. Even though they're negatives, they're still the same sign. They're both negative. So the answer is positive. And then when the signs are different, when you have different signs, your answer is negative. So 3 times negative 4, we have a positive times a negative, so our answer is negative because they're different signs. Negative 9 times a positive 2, different signs, the answer is negative. Pause the video when needed so you can stay caught up on the notes. Okay, so let's practice. Here we have a positive times a negative. The signs are different, so our answer is negative. I want you to go ahead and complete this in your journal or on your notes sheet where you have room. Just go through. You don't really need to do the math. Just go through and write what the sign would be, if it would be a positive or a negative. Once you're done, come back, check, see how you did. Okay, going over to problem B. We have a positive times a positive, so our answer is positive. A positive times a negative is a negative. A positive times a positive is a positive. A negative times a negative, they're both negative, they're the same signs, so it's a positive answer. And a negative times a negative, again, same signs, positive answer. But what about with division? What did you think? Are the rules going to be different for division? No. The division rules are going to be the same. The quotient of two integers with the same signs is going to be positive. You'll need to put this in your notes booklet. So if I have 10 divided by 5, they're both positive, it's going to give us a positive answer. If I have a negative 12 divided by negative 4, they're both negatives, same signs, positive answer. Now, you're going to start writing your division using this fraction bar, because this fraction bar, its operation means to divide. You're going to see this a lot. Get used to it. You're going to start using it yourself. And it's read 10 divided by 5. Negative 12 divided by negative 4. So this is the same as saying 10 divided by 5. This is the same thing as saying negative 12 divided by negative 4. All right. What about dividing when the quotient of two integers with different signs? If their signs are different, then your answer is negative, just like with the multiplication. Negative 10 divided by positive 5, different signs, the answer is negative. Positive 12 divided by negative 4, they're different signs, so your answer is negative. Okay, again, let's practice. Let's do problem A. We have a negative divided by a positive. Their signs are different, so our answer is negative. Again, pause the video. Go ahead and put the sign for each of the problems in your journal and then come back and check. Okay, negative divided by negative, same signs, gives us a positive answer. For C, we have a negative divided by a positive, different signs will give us a negative answer. Problem D, 15 divided by 3, positive divided by a positive is a positive. For E, a negative divided by a negative, they're the same signs, that will give us a positive answer. And for F, a positive divided by a negative will give us a negative. Okay, these are some tricks to help us remember with combining integers, adding and subtracting. We had the song that helped us remember what to do if the signs were the same and what to do if they were different. You cannot use those tricks for multiplication and division. Multiplication and division have their own tricks. And these are 3 different tricks that I'm going to introduce you to, and you just pick the trick that you like. Okay, the first trick is you have 3 faces. Okay, the first face has 2 positive eyes, and he has a smile. Go ahead and put this in your journal. The second face has 2 negative eyes, and he has a smile. The third one has a positive eye and a negative eye, and he has a big old frown. Okay, so the first face is just a happy guy. He's happy, he's having a good day, so he is in a positive mood. Same eyes, his eyes are the same, he's positive. The second smiley face, he's sleeping. He's having a good dream. He's dreaming about all these A's that he's going to make on his math test, right? So he's also in a good mood for good dreams. Same eyes, he's positive. This guy right here, he got into a fight at school yesterday and he got punched in the eye. So he has one eye open, one eye closed. He is not in a good mood. He is negative. Okay, so of course the hint here was to look at the eyes. If the eyes are both the same, they're positive. Here, both were positive. Here, they were both negative. But if the eyes are different, then it's a negative. You can also make a tic-tac-toe chart. For some reason, this didn't complete, but on the tic-tac-toe chart, you're going to do the positives in one of the diagonals. It doesn't matter which direction you go, but in one of the diagonals, you'll put positive symbols. Every place else, you're going to put negative symbols. And the way this works is you just start, I'm going to start here. A positive times a negative is going to equal a negative. Or if you start here and you say, okay, a positive times a negative will equal a negative, or a positive times a negative will equal a negative. A negative, if we start with a negative times a positive is going to equal a negative. So you kind of get the idea of how that works. And then we have the triangle. And the triangle is going to be the same thing as the tic-tac-toe chart, except for it doesn't give you the positive times the positive. So it'll just give you a positive times a negative equals a negative. Or you could start with this negative, and you could say a negative times a negative will give you a positive. Or you could say, oh, start with this negative again, you could say negative times a positive is going to equal a negative. But those are some tricks that you can use. Only works for multiplying and dividing integers, not adding and subtracting. Okay, so here's your homework. Two-sided homework. First one, why is the nose in the middle of your face? Again, the riddles are up to you as to whether or not you want to do them. But this is what I expect to see. I expect to see the answers written next to the problems. Okay, a negative 4 times a positive 5 is going to be a negative 20. A positive 6 times a negative 8. We have a positive times a negative. The signs are different. Your answer is going to be negative. So it would be negative 48. Here we have a negative times a negative. They're both positive, so your answer is going to be 18. And actually, I do want you to put the signs above. A negative times a positive, just for this practice, just for this homework. So that you can say a negative times a positive. Different signs, negative answer. At the top of your sheet or on the side, go ahead and put down one of the tricks that you want to use. I'm just going to go for the triangle because it's easier. And then I can use this, a negative times a positive, so I can go negative times a positive will give me a negative answer. Okay, what about in box number 8 when you have 3 factors that you're multiplying together? Well, you can do 2 at a time. A negative times a positive, this will give me negative 6 because it's 2 different signs. And then if I multiply negative 6 times negative 5, I see that they're both negatives, which are the same signs, so your answer is 30. A little shortcut is if you have an odd number of factors, like here, well, no, I can't really say that. Okay, no, scratch that. Just do 2 at a time. 4 positive times a negative is going to be a negative, so 4 times negative 1 is going to be negative 4. And then the negative times the positive 9 is going to give you a negative 36. So a negative times a negative is a positive, so it'd be positive 40. And positive 40 times a positive 2 is going to be a positive 80. Same signs. Okay. And second page is going to be division. Okay, again, at the top of your page, put your trick, whichever trick you're using. Negative 15 divided by a positive 3, so it's a negative divided by a positive. A negative divided by positive equals a negative 15. Make sure you're writing your answers next to the problem. Here we have a positive divided by a negative. So a positive divided by a negative will give us a negative because they're different signs, so it's a negative 12. When you come down here, this fraction bar, of course, means to do what? It means to divide. So a positive divided by a positive is going to give us a positive answer, and 72 divided by 9 is 8. Here, a negative divided by a negative, same signs, so it's going to be a positive answer. 40 divided by 4 is 10. Look at B. All right, B is bringing in a little bit of the order of operations. If you'll recall, we need to do the parentheses first. So we have a negative divided by a negative. Same signs, it's going to give us a positive answer. 18 divided by 2 is 9. Here we have a positive divided by a positive, which will give us a positive answer. 28 divided by 7 is 4, and they want us to add them together. So 9 plus 4 is 13. Okay, what about this one, 36? 36, or C, 36 divided by 9. A positive divided by a positive is going to be a positive 4. I'm going to bring down the plus. When you have this fraction bar, you have to look at these as being parentheses. Okay, you have to solve this part first. It's actually division, and division would come before the addition. But sometimes you have other operations in the numerator, the denominator. Okay, second one, we have 40 divided by negative 5. So positive divided by negative is going to be a negative, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. Now we need to combine. So this is where we need to go to what we learned last week. Circle our integers and their signs. We have a positive and a negative. If the signs are different, then you should have said subtract, right? So 8 minus 4 is 4. Go to war, more negatives, so the answer is negative 4.